You have seen the commercial. Smiling fans from every corner of the planet, arms around strangers, flags from 100 nations woven together under one stadium roof. Everyone is welcome. That was the promise. Now watch this instead. Shaky phone footage from an airport terminal. A line of exhausted travelers standing for hours behind a rope line. Football scarves still around their necks. Border agents moving down the queue one passport at a time. This is not the commercial. This is the tournament FIFA actually built. They told us this would be the most inclusive World Cup in history. Then 75 countries had their fans' visa processing halted before a single ticket could be used. Because in America, talent alone does not get you onto the pitch. You also have to survive 11 hours of psychological questioning at the border. And what if I told you an entire national team was banned from sleeping in the country it was scheduled to play in? Stay with this. Because what happened to one team has no precedent in World Cup history. Iran qualified for this World Cup fairly on the pitch through their own performances. Then the United States government made a decision that has never applied to a World Cup squad before. Iranian players would not be permitted to sleep on American soil overnight, not for security screening, not for a single night, for the entire tournament. The solution forced upon Iran's federation was to base their entire training camp in Tijuana, Mexico. Every single time Iran plays a group stage match, against New Zealand, against Belgium, both at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, and later against Egypt in Seattle, the squad crosses an international border. They fly in, they play. They fly back out, returning to Mexico the same day or the next. A World Cup team managing border logistics as a routine part of its match week, on a tournament with games separated by 1,000 miles, jet lag and recovery managed across two sovereign countries simultaneously. And while that diplomatic embarrassment played out, FIFA's president sat in the stands in Antalya, Turkey, and watched Iran beat Costa Rica 5-0 in a warm-up match. He stayed for the entire game. He smiled for the cameras. Months earlier, at the FIFA Congress in Vancouver, Infantino had opened his remarks by declaring, unprompted, that Iran would absolutely be participating in this World Cup, as if daring anyone in the room to suggest otherwise. The same organization willing to showcase Iran's football for a photo opportunity, and willing to insist publicly on their participation, has said nothing meaningful about why that team cannot sleep in the country hosting its World Cup matches. This is not a logistics footnote. This is a national team living in exile from the tournament it qualified for. It did not have to be this way, and the lead-up to this arrangement reveals just how hard Iran's federation fought against it. Iran's Football Federation released a 10-point ultimatum months before the tournament, demanding guaranteed visas for every player and staff member, specifically naming Captain Ezan Safi and Mehdi Tehrami, whose mandatory military service histories complicated their applications under U.S. immigration classification. They demanded their anthem played correctly, their flag respected, their delegation protected at airports, hotels, and on the roads between venues. They asked FIFA to simply move their group stage matches to Mexico entirely. FIFA said no to relocation. Their original base camp in Tucson, Arizona, planned and approved months in advance, became the subject of weeks of back and forth before the U.S. government ultimately refused to allow the squad to stay overnight on American territory at all. The compromise that emerged, Tijuana as a permanent base, with border crossings before and after every match, was not a creative solution. It was the only option left once every other avenue had been blocked. And Iran is not alone. Iraq's national team arrived at Chicago's O'Hare Airport on June 5th. Their star forward Ayman Hussein was detained for 7 hours. Border officials questioned him extensively. His phone was examined during the process. The team's official photographer was held for more than 10 hours before being denied entry altogether and sent back out of the country. Then there is Omar Artan, FIFA's own selected referee, voted the best official in African football for 2025. One of only 52 referees trusted with matches at this World Cup, chosen through a rigorous 3-year merit process by FIFA itself. He carried a diplomatic passport, a valid visa, FIFA accreditation. None of it mattered. Held for 11 hours at Miami Airport, Question not about football, but about Al-Shabaab, the militant organization operating in parts of Somalia, placed in a holding cell, sent back to Istanbul on the next available flight. FIFA's response to its own selected official being detained and removed from the tournament it was hosting: 5 words. We are not involved in host country immigration processes. That is not a policy position. That is an institution bowing its head and stepping out of the way while the people it invited get treated like suspects. This pattern reaches beyond officials and players into the fans themselves. 4 qualified nations, Iran, Haiti, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, have supporters who legally earned the right to watch their teams compete at this World Cup and physically cannot enter the host country to do it. Travel restrictions affecting nearly 40 countries, tightened significantly in recent years, mean that for a meaningful share of this tournament's qualified nations, the dream of attending in person was never realistic to begin with. Regardless of how much they saved or how badly they wanted to be there. Now look at what this border state atmosphere has done to the tournament beyond the pitch. European flight bookings to the United States this summer are down 14%, in a year when the dollar is weaker against the euro, and the trip should be cheaper than ever. Real fans are running the calculation and deciding the risk of an airport interrogation outweighs the joy of watching their team play. Hotel blocks across host cities have seen 70% of their reservations quietly cancelled. The wave of visitors FIFA promised never arrived, because the people who would have filled those rooms made a decision about whether this country felt safe to enter, and in significant numbers, they decided it didn't. The real fans are rejecting a system that treats arrival at the border as a presumption of guilt rather than an invitation to a celebration. So here is the question worth asking directly, because it cuts to the heart of what a World Cup is supposed to be. If a football team cannot sleep in the country it is scheduled to compete in, if a star forward can be detained for 7 hours and his phone searched before he ever sets foot on a training pitch, if FIFA's own selected referee can be interrogated about terrorism for 11 hours and sent home without explanation, does that tournament still have legitimacy as a celebration of the global game, or has it become something else entirely? Tell me what you think in the comments. Should a World Cup be allowed to continue when one of its participating nations cannot legally sleep in the host country? Where is the line between hosting rights and basic dignity for the people this sport is supposed to belong to? Like this video if you want the real story instead of the highlight reel. Subscribe. We are tracking every border crossing, every detention, and every silence from FIFA until the final whistle on July 19th. Football is never just a tournament. It is a test of whether the world can still come together inside one stadium. And right now that test is failing at every airport gate.